I just grabbed the girl's hands and we were running, and there's a body and another body and another body.
All of a sudden, this SWAT guys come in with big machine guns and start yelling at us, going, "Get down, get down!"
This is a crazed lunatic full of hate.
It was an act of pure evil.
We're angry, we're grieving, we're confused. People are hurting. It was a cowardly, despicable act.
Such a tragedy to lose human life like this. These are the people who are our family. We're so distraught and brokenhearted right now.
The American spirit cannot and will not ever be broken.
All right, well, it is Tuesday, October 3rd, a rough morning of Fox News alert happening right now, the hunt for a motive into what drove a deranged gunman to open fire on a country concert on the Vegas Strip.
At this hour, 59 people are dead. More than 500 others are injured. And we have just learned that the killer stockpiled thousands of bullets in his bags at the hotel.
And he had at least 23 guns in his room as well. You're watching Fox and Friends first on this Tuesday morning. I'm Rob Schmidt.
And I'm Heather Childers. Late last night, less than 100 miles away from the scene, police finding more guns and explosives inside the shooter's home.
And we're going to take you there live with Jillian Mealy in just a moment in our Fox News team coverage.
But first, we begin with Adam Housley. He is live for us once again on the Las Vegas Strip with the latest in the investigation. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning. Yeah, that investigation continues at this hour, not only in the hotel room above us back in at the Mandalay Bay, but also at the actual crime scene right behind us, where, of course, the shootings took place, where 22,000 people were packed in at that country concert. There are still investigators inside. They're still doing tedious work. There are still bodies that have yet to been identified, and families have yet to be notified. We're also getting an exclusive look now of what the hotel room looked like 1 year ago. It gives us an idea of what it was like inside. There's been a lot of speculation about whether there were two rooms or whether it was one room. I've been told it's a two-room suite. Dr. Jason Huffman's a Fox viewer and was actually here at the exact same time a year ago for this exact same concert, the country concert, and he had walked into the room with his phone and took some video last year to kind of show off the large two-room suite that overlooked the Strip and down onto the actual festival. You can see the perspective of what the gunman used, and you can see the unobstructed views of the festival grounds there in the distance, and it gives you an idea of what he had planned, and that's what authorities are still looking at in the investigative part. We've had a chance to, of course, hear from so many folks who were not only here but also first responders and city leaders in the last 24 hours, and here's how one of the city leaders explained what's been going on here. Take a listen.
These past 20 hours have been trying, and we know we have a long way to go. I'm proud of the courage and resiliency displayed by all our first responders on this event. Please allow our department the ability to do what they do the best: investigate crime and keep you safe.
And at this hour, there's still a very large crime scene here in the southern part of the Strip. There's still only certain areas you can go. There'll still be investigators here, we're told, for a number of hours. Yesterday they told us that they thought they'd be done by about 10 o'clock last night, but when you talk to them off camera, which is we, of course, were here in the same location, they would have told you that it would be much longer than that. This is a very large crime scene that, you know, spans literally the entire festival grounds, not counting the gunman's house, not counting the hotel room, not counting down some of these streets where bodies were found, guys. So this will be going on here for a number of days as still families are searching for loved ones. You can see it online. It's very, very tragic. Back to you guys.
It really is. And then the stories we mentioned of all the heroes that have come out of this, you can't help but get tears in your eyes when you listen to some of them.
Can't even imagine. All right,
Absolutely.
Adam, thank you.
Well, authorities are now trying to enter the mind of the madmen as the search for a motive intensifies.
Well, it turns out, in a bizarre twist here, his father had a long criminal history. Jillian Mealy picks up our team coverage from Mesquite, Nevada. That's about 90 miles to the east of where the shooting happened. Jillian.
Heather and Rob, his father, actually a bank robber. He was on the FBI's most wanted list back in the 60s and 70s. So definitely an interesting fact there that emerged in the last 24 hours. But Stephen Paddock himself is still a bit of a mystery. As far as we know at this point, no real digital footprint. In the next couple days, a lot more information is expected to come out. But for now, I want to show you two pictures that we just took, if we can put them up on the screen, from the two houses directly next door to Stephen Paddock's house. The first one says, "Don't block our driveway, stay off our yard, don't ring our doorbell." Now, the other one is of interest, and this is a rather long post on the front door, but I want to read it to you because it kind of gives you a little glimpse into what it's like being a neighbor. It says, "Our community is doing its best to deal with the tragic event that occurred in Las Vegas. The shock that one of our neighbors was responsible for such a heinous act. We understand you have questions. We do not have anything to provide relating to the actions of our neighbor or insight into his behavior. We did not know him. Thank you for respecting our privacy." That line there, "we did not know him." Guys, you have to imagine Stephen's lived here for a couple years. That's his neighbor directly next door to him. So a guy that's certainly kept to himself. That's what we're hearing quite often, both here in Nevada and also some of his neighbors in Florida when he lived there. Listen to that.
If I waved to him, he wouldn't wave back. He would not engage you in conversation.
He seemed like a normal senior citizen. He and Mary Lou, just like my husband and I. I mean, other than his line of work was professional gambling.
So Mary Lou, by the way, his girlfriend, we are told, who lived here in his home with him, you heard her mention gambling. That's what everybody talks about when they talk about Stephen Paddock, is how much of a gambler he was. That was what he did. That's apparently why he moved out to Nevada, to be close to Las Vegas. We're about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and 30 minutes drive outside of Las Vegas. And just to get you caught up on what went down inside this home yesterday, we are here in a cul-de-sac area of this retirement community where Stephen lived, and there are about 4 houses right in this cul-de-sac, so not too many people back here. It is a quiet area. Officials did block off about a 2-block radius yesterday. People were not allowed in their homes, not allowed near this neighborhood. And you can see behind me here, the garage is boarded up. That's because that's how authorities entered. That's how SWAT entered the house. Once they were in there, they recovered 19 guns. They recovered a whole bunch of ammunition, and they also recovered explosives. So right now, they're just trying to dig into this man's past, and at this point, he is still a bit of a mystery, guys.
Certainly is. All right, Jillian, well, thank you so much for that update from Mesquite and where the gunman lived, just about 90 miles to the east of where the shooting happened. All right, thank you. All right, Las Vegas witnessing the worst mass shooting in American history. So with no obvious red flags at this point, what exactly are investigators looking at right now to try and piece this thing together?
Well, Sheriff David Clark is the spokesman and senior advisor for America First Action, and he joins us now to provide a little more insight. Thank you so much for joining us, first of all.
My pleasure.
So what's the first thing that you think is happening in terms of trying to come up with a motive and figure this guy out?
Well, I think you're a little ways away from that. The first aspect of this is the collection of evidence, and you collect everything. You don't try to determine its relevancy at this point. You just make sure you process it. There's going to be trace evidence. There's going to be other physical evidence and document evidence. And what you do is you start from the middle of the scene and you start to work outward. So this thing will go well beyond the Vegas Strip there in terms of interviewing people, looking at records, ATF records, gun purchase records, that sort of thing. And then once you have collected everything, you start to put it together and start to analyze it, and a picture will start to form, and it'll tell you a lot about this situation.
Are you as surprised as I think a lot of people are? And you're obviously somebody that's investigated a lot of crime, but I mean, the initial, what we've learned initially just about this man, it shows no real outward or loud political motives, no religious motives. You look for something, or maybe a woman in his life that had recently left him, or financial troubles. I mean, the big basic things that seem to inspire the majority of these types of events are not there. Does that surprise you, at least at this point?
Well, once they start to analyze the evidence and the picture starts to form, I think we're going to learn a lot about the scene. But I think some other things that need to be looked at right now is our See Something, Say Something campaign, and I think it needs to be reevaluated, because one of the most effective things that we can do to prevent, detect, disrupt these sorts of investigations is to involve the public. I believe that as this investigation goes on and as they start to interview people, we'll learn a lot more. Maybe somebody did see something, including hotel personnel, including the video, how this guy got this type of arsenal into a hotel or casino complex, but that comes later on. But to See Something, Say Something, we don't find a more effective way to involve the public. When I say we, I'm talking law enforcement. It's going to be very hard to uncover these things and to stay into that prevention mode, that detection mode, and the disruption of this type of incident.
You know, Sheriff Clark, it's a fine line. You know, you don't want to impede on people's freedoms, but at the same time, you want to, you know, be able to recognize when there are red flags, when something might be a little bit off. And Mike Baker had brought this up a little bit earlier. And my question is, are there any types of checks and balances in terms of the amount of handguns, the amount of ammunition that someone can purchase? Because, you know, we know that the firearms that this gentleman owned were legal, but he owned, there were 23 found in the hotel room. There were another 19 found at his home. That's what we know so far. Is there any type of checks and balances with that would maybe be a red flag for people?
Yeah, any flag that would be raised. If you're buying 20 or more weapons, is there anything that tells you that? I guess there's not.
No, well, no, you know what, we try to point to and try to find the technical aspects of this. 20 handguns with a magazine, or one handgun or one rifle with 50 magazines is still going to be able to do that same amount of damage, maybe not in the period of time that he needed. But the thing is, you know, we got to find that sweet spot. We got to find that balance between protecting the public, protecting the homeland, and preserving people's constitutional rights. And that's the tricky thing in this sort of situation, because look, there are over 300 million guns in the United States. We're not going to know where all of them are. Some people have multiple guns. But here's the thing I want people to understand. The ordinary gun owner would never dream, even having a nightmare, of taking that firearm and committing this type of carnage. So I want to caution people about overreacting. When I say people, I'm talking about politicians. I'm hearing it already. We need more gun control. No, we don't. Look, we need to do something, but we need to do something reasonable. We need to do something that's achievable. And with 300 million guns in circulation, thinking you're going to collect all those guns is not the answer. And again, I want to point out, the average gun owner would never use that firearm in this sort of fashion.
Yeah.
That is a good point. All right, Sheriff, well, thank you so much. As the discussion and debate continues about how to prevent things like this from happening, and there aren't a lot of good answers out there right now from either side, and that is the big question. But thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Sheriff Clark. Well, the time now is about 10 minutes after the top of the hour. And in the face of tragedy, the Trump administration urging Americans to come together.
The American spirit cannot and will not ever be broken. In the days ahead, we will grieve as a nation. We will honor the memory of those lost as a nation.
Trying to see some positives from this story. During the chaos, an Iraq War veteran rushes to the scene to use his own truck as an ambulance to take victims to the hospital. A very unbelievable story that will make you proud. That's coming up next.
And welcome back to Fox and Friends First. As the search for answers continues, the names and the stories of all of these victims, the Las Vegas victims, they're beginning to emerge. 24 of the 59 killed so far have been identified, but as many as a dozen others are still in critical condition this morning. Hundreds of people waiting up to 6 hours to donate blood at 3 locations. Look at these lines near Las Vegas, some even lining up in the middle of the night, just hours after the shooting. A GoFundMe page has been set up to support the victims and their families, with thousands of dollars raising, or thousands of donors raising nearly $3 million in less than 24 hours.
And that is really something else. Well, in the midst of the tragedy, stories of heroism and compassion are emerging from America's deadliest mass shooting and just a horrific display of violence that we saw. Iraq War veteran Taylor Winston did not hesitate to save lives, using an unoccupied van left with the keys in its ignition as a makeshift ambulance. The 29-year-old says he brought about 30 people to the hospital in a series of trips. A real hero. Also, Taylor Benj, who survived the shooting, says that his own sister jumped on top of him when the bullets started to fly.
My sister, you know, being as noble as she is, she actually threw herself on top of me and was saying, "I love you, Taylor, I love you." And I'll never forget that.
That is fantastic. And she survived as well. They both survived. Also, off-duty Arizona firefighter Kurt Fowler was shot in the leg as he raced to shield his wife from bullets. Fowler was seriously injured and had to undergo surgery, and we are all pulling for him.
Yeah.
And another act of heroism. We do love to hear things like that.
Just the beginning of those stories. Well, shock and grief, meantime, pouring in from all across the country following the deadly shooting in Las Vegas. The White House holding a moment of silence to honor the lives lost.
And Ellison Barber joins us live in Washington with the response from the Oval Office. Ellison.
President Trump is set to fly to Las Vegas tomorrow. The sheriff there says he spoke to the president yesterday, and President Trump is expected to meet with him in person come Wednesday. Yesterday, behind the press podium, we saw something we don't normally see from White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She choked up as she spoke about the first responders, the regular people who, when the sound of gunfire started to replace the sound of country music, didn't cower in fear, but stood up and helped.
The memory of those who displayed the ultimate expression of love in the midst of an unimaginable act of hate will never fade.
The president called the attack an act of pure evil.
Though we feel such great anger at the senseless murder of our fellow citizens, it is our love that defines us today and always will, forever.
He did not speak about terrorism, and he did not mention gun control. On Capitol Hill, Democrats said thoughts and prayers are not enough.
I want my colleagues to understand the pain that comes when the victims of this kind of epidemic violence see nothing but silence from this body. Compassion is important, but it is not enough.
The president and first lady are heading to Puerto Rico today to see the damage caused by Hurricane Maria. Critics have said the administration's response there has been inadequate. Again, tomorrow, President Trump will visit Nevada, 2 places, 2 days, one the place of a natural disaster, the other one a disaster made by man. Heather, Rob.
Yes, very true. This administration has had to deal with so much. Thank you, Ellison.
It's been a rough 4 or 6 weeks now. All right, Ellison, thanks so much. The time is now 18 minutes after the hour. Could this shooting have been prevented? This is the question this morning about the Las Vegas massacre.
And our next guest, a terror preparedness expert, says it is possible, and he has a plan to protect soft targets. What you need to know to stay safe up next.
Well, soft targets like the concert venue in Las Vegas now prompting questions about whether such an attack could have been prevented by hotel or by city officials, by police.
So how, if at all, can you protect yourself? Here to weigh in now is a former member of Israel's Special Operations Counter-Terrorist Unit, Aaron Cohen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
You say that there are several layers to this that could possibly protect people.
Yeah, professional quality security lives in a reflexive, expansive, and multi-layered system, which means that it would take a multi-failure event for a mass shooter or a terrorist to reach his target. Every layer or ring would have to fail. And so one of the things we've learned over years of dealing with terrorism in Israel is that you can't have total security. You can't have total safety. So what you do is you supplement it with as many layers as possible so that you can push the threat as far away. And in the case of this particular mass shooting, I believe that simple bag checks, no matter how annoying it gets, I really do believe that simple bag checks would have been able to detect the weapons before they got upstairs, which then leads us to the deny phase. And then there's the deterrence phase as well, which is having an armed presence. And I believe that there was semi-adequate security at the actual concert, but there was a lack of security at the hotel, to nobody's fault, because this is the first time we've seen carnage of this level here in this country directed from a hotel directly above a crowd. But if I was advising the president, every soft target where there's thousands of people that are congregating, there needs to be security that expands accordingly, and that includes a lot of undercover police as well. We rely on our plainclothes and off-duty officers in Israel tremendously, and they act as force multipliers, and there's over 1 million sworn officers here in this country. I'd be tapping into that really aggressively as well.
Isn't this, I mean, this is kind of the reactionary sense, though, that I get kind of, it becomes frustrating because it's like, okay, now we do this. Okay, now they're going to do this. Okay, then we do this. Now they do this. They go this way. Now we just chase it around.
Agreed.
At a terribly large expense, too. The security industry is billions and billions of dollars every year that we spend in this country. It almost feels like we're chasing them when we need them to start chasing us, right?
I agree with you. I think that's very well put. Here's the thing. Security exists in the area prior to the attack. And the problem in our country when it comes to our security, because we have a lot of polarized opinions about things that are being taken away from us and rights and those types of things, and the uncomforts that we'll have to face and the threat of a police state, quote unquote. The truth is that good security doesn't need to infringe on too much of your personal life, and I really do think that people do want to be safe here. And I think that looking at this mass siege that we just saw, there's not one family member related to anyone in that crowd who doesn't want good security moving forward. But again, the security and the planning happens and lives and breathes in all of that space before these attacks. And so we can't rely on our first responders. And man, did we see some heroic action here, and we saw veterans, and we saw, unfortunately, the best of people get brought out during these types of tragedies, and that's what has brought us together in Israel collectively for the last 60 years. Everybody serves in the military. It's mandatory, and there's this collective, even though we're polarized sometimes politically.
Right.
But the truth is we have to fill those voids before these attacks, and the president, I think, has probably already begun to think about putting together some type of task force to look at how we're going to protect these crowds. And again, we don't have to have bag checks 24 hours at every hotel. Yeah, we don't have to have bag checks at 24 hours at these hotels, but we should bolster the security while these events expand, and then we can fold it and collapse it just like a production.
All right.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah, that task force definitely will be formed to keep this from happening again, hopefully. Well, the time now is about 26 minutes after the top of the hour, and dozens of explosives and guns uncovered inside the killer's home, and an elaborate setup inside the hotel room where he pulled that trigger several times. So how did he manage to fly under the radar, and could this have been prevented?
That's right. Our law enforcement panel is back to answer the questions everyone has this morning. Stay with us for that.
We believe Paddock is solely responsible for this heinous act.
We're shocked, horrified. Where the hell did he get automatic weapons?
I would not want to wish it upon anybody. To see what we saw is a horrible, horrible, horrible moment in my life, but we were able to take care of people.
A Fox News alert for you. Brand new details this morning into the worst mass shooting in modern U.S. history.
That's right. New details emerging about the killer and his family's criminal history.
And the first victims who lost their lives at the hands of this deranged gunman are being identified.
Adam Housley is live in Las Vegas, where authorities are trying to unravel a motive this morning. Adam.
That's right. They're trying to unravel a motive not only here, but at his house, about an hour or so drive away. I can tell you at this hour here at the location where the shooting took place a little more than 24 hours ago, there is still an ongoing investigation. Even in this early morning in Las Vegas, you can see different investigators walking around. Not as many people that were here, obviously, when it was light out, but still a number of units that are parked outside. Of course, the entire area is still shut down, and inside there is a very tedious investigative process going on as they document the entire area, which is, of course, about a couple of acres in size where the concert was taking place. Also up above, I can see lights on inside the room where the shooter took his aim at so many people down below. And as you might imagine, it's really resulted in a lot of rage here in Las Vegas, including from the mayor. Take a listen.
The act and insanity of a scumbag madman. It's just been a tragic time. How dare any human being do that? This has just been a tremendous bonding for us all as we come together, and we just know the sadness is that there are probably a beautiful number of 59 new stars in the heavens.
59 new stars in the heavens. You can see the stars out here tonight in Las Vegas, and not the ones you find on the Strip, but the ones up in the sky. A couple of notes to give it back to you. One, they've also asked people here to refrain from giving blood for a day because they do have a lot of blood. They had massive lines here. They do say they'll need more, so they're asking people maybe to come on Wednesday or Thursday to give blood. Also, still families that we've heard from via text and via Twitter and Instagram and Facebook that are still looking for loved ones. We know there's some in the hospital that have not yet been, they're in very serious condition. And we also know that they haven't been identified. And we also have people that were unfortunately killed that have yet to be identified. And so families do have pages put up, guys. It's very sad just to see those as they look for their loved ones that are missing still at this hour. Back to you guys.
It's horrific, and I cannot imagine the anxiety that comes with not knowing for coming on 30 hours now. All right, Adam, thank you so much. All right, a weapons stockpile and a dark family history uncovered. So how did the gunman in the deadliest shooting in American history slide right beneath the radar of law enforcement? For more insight on this, let's bring in our law enforcement panel. Former member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, Steve Rogers, former CIA Covert Operations Officer Mike Baker, and former D.C. Police Detective Ted Williams. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming on this morning. We do appreciate it. Steve, we'll start with you. How does somebody like this go from being almost, nobody had any idea there was anything to this guy until he does something like this? I mean, there's usually an escalation in crime. There was nothing here. Well, you're absolutely right. No history of domestic violence. There was no history of any involvement with law enforcement. No history of mental illness. I mean, I could go on and on. Look, the motive is something that police are now scratching their heads about. But I'm thinking in this term that this was a venue that was all-American. I mean, these country western events are all American, American pride, etc. It may just boil down to that this guy had a beef with the country. He didn't like the way things were going, and he decided that he was going to take this horrific act. It could be as simple as that. So I believe at the end of the day, the criminal psychologists, the criminal profilers that weigh in are going to have a lot to do with helping us find the motive. Mike, let's extend that over to you. If it was as simple as that, that was the first thing that crossed my mind, is that it could have been politically motivated because of the type of people that attend a country music concert, frankly. But if that were the case, wouldn't you suspect that there would be more outwardly visible political displays in his life? I mean, people would know that he was this radically left, I guess.
I don't know. I think maybe in the age of social media, we're all used to seeing people air their laundry out there. But I think the average person, still the majority of people live below the radar. And, most of them are, blank canvases. As Steve said, this guy didn't, pop up. There were no service calls on him. So it's frustrating for people because we all want the answer to why. But sometimes you just have to let the investigation run its course. And, again, we're kind of used to this age where we get everything immediately. And that's not how investigations oftentimes play out. We'll get the motive. We'll figure that out. But right now, it's all speculation. And frankly, I don't think speculation ever really helps anything. And I completely agree. And that's one of the big risks of having to do television all day long, is that you begin to speculate just to have something to talk about. And you don't want to do that. Ted, over to you real quick. You've been a detective. You've investigated a lot of crimes. You're an attorney now. Is it bizarre to you that this deep into it, we have really no idea what this guy was thinking? I mean, it must at least be bizarre, even if we know we have to investigate. It's just strange, isn't it?
Well, Rob, Mike and Steve are right on target here. We're going to have to let this play out. I think one of the keys to this investigation is going to be Mary Lou Dantley, the girlfriend that's out of town. She was the closest person associated with this guy, so clearly they're going to be looking at her. And as Steve said, hey, this guy may have just set this up. We know something significant here, Rob. Rob, and that is that there was supposedly been ammonium nitrate and fertilizer found in his car. All our viewing audience need to remember was the Mora building in Oklahoma where we had Timothy McVeigh. And so this guy may have had a lot of greater things that he wanted to do to bring attention to himself.
Yeah, that's certainly true. Steve, back to you for a second. And another big question that a lot of people want answered is, how do you stay safe in a country where we're seeing an escalation in violence like this, where we're seeing more and more gun violence and mass shootings? I know everybody now is talking about, security at hotels. Of course, that's where we're going to go. That kind of reaction and that reactionary kind of response, what happens the next time somebody goes into a grocery store? Are we going to start checking everybody that walks into Whole Foods? Are we going to start checking everybody every time they go? What if this happen from an office building? Are you going to get your bags checked every time you go to work?
You're right. There's a lot of debate over how we can do this, but I think the best way and the most effective way is going to be what we've said all along. If you hear something, you see something, say something. Look, Ted was spot on about this female that may have been involved. Look, she may not be directly involved in this, but she may have knowledge, and maybe there are other people who had knowledge about this individual, and they should have said something. So I think the best defense and the best preventive measures we can take is people to step up and say something if they see something.
That is, and that's a code that the New York City lives by, and I think it certainly is. If you have any indication at all, you can't be shy about it. You got to just go out there and you got to at least give somebody a heads up. Guys, thanks so much for coming on this morning. We do appreciate your time. All right, 38 minutes after the hour now, Democrats calling for gun control in the wake of the Las Vegas massacre. So is now the time to get political with this? Why our next guest, a former NYPD commissioner, is blasting the left for using this tragedy and so soon to advance their own agenda. Also, Jason Aldean performing on stage the moment that the gunman opened fire. He had to run off to save his own life. The country music superstar opening up overnight. And Carly Shimkus is here with what he's now saying on social media. You don't want to miss that. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends First. The Vegas massacre sending shockwaves through the country music industry.
That's right. Carly Shimkus with Fox News Headlines 24/7, Sirius XM 115, here with a lot of responses to this unspeakable tragedy.
Yeah, good morning, Rob and Heather. The country music industry is a tight-knit community of artists and fans. So for many musicians, this felt personal, which is why these online tributes are still pouring in. And country music superstar Garth Brooks responded with this emotional Facebook video.
Character flows in country music. All our love to the victims' families, all our loves to the band and crews. Tough.
Yeah, well, Jason Aldean was on stage when the shooting erupted, and he posted a new Instagram message just a few hours ago saying, over the last 24 hours, I have gone through lots of emotions, scared, anger, heartache, compassion, and many others. This world is becoming the kind of place I'm afraid to raise my children in. We are all humans, and we are all Americans, and it's time to start acting like it and stand together as one. Tim McGraw also tweeted, the world has endured so many tragedies this year, each one heart-wrenching in its own unique way. Brad Paisley also chimed in, tweeting, praying for everyone at Harvest Festival. There are no words right now to suffice. I love country music, our fans, our industry. We are a family, and we are hurting together. And the Zac Brown Band also tweeted, last night the music community was shaken to its core by a senseless, tragic event. We grieve for the victims and all those affected. Now, from grief comes action, because a GoFundMe page called the Las Vegas Victims Fund page has raised nearly $3 million in less than 24 hours. So a lot of people, Rob and Heather, helping out today.
Yeah. Find it cathartic to give something back and try and do something positive in the wake of all that negativity. Carly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, 44 minutes after the hour, time to check in, see what's coming up on Fox and Friends.
Yeah, Steve Ducey has traveled to the scene. He is live for us in Las Vegas this morning with continuing coverage of this tragic incident. Steve?
Good morning to you, Heather, and good morning to you, Rob, as well. That's right. We are here on the Strip, right back there, Mandalay Bay. And between me and Mandalay Bay is the field where it all happened. dark like this.
Audio problems there with Steve, we understand, but we're going to have much more from Steve Ducey. He's going to be live there at the scene of what happened. That's going to be coming up in about 15 minutes. We'll be right back.
Stay with us.